to the fall AUVSI Symposium. Really appreciate you guys coming. I really appreciate all of the hard work that goes into making these things, and we really do it for three reasons. You know, we want to educate, advocate, and communicate, and we did a great networking event last night where we were able to connect a lot of folks up, and today will be very educational. We've got some great speakers, and we've got a great event planned for you. So I look forward to proceeding with all of that and tell you a little bit about the chapter. We have over 400 members of the chapter. We use the dues and sponsors, the revenues that we get go significantly towards STEM grants and educational benefits for students. We've supported high schools in Pendleton and Hillsborough and Hood River and throughout Washington and Oregon. We've supported many different continuing education programs, such as the one that just started up in Pendleton. They're training new pilots, and so it's well received and doing great things. So your chapter is busy working for you, and we're glad that you came to be a part of it. I want to take a minute to thank our event sponsors. We have Mobile Power, and they are a great company right here in Oregon, and they do design and certification of batteries and battery packs, and we're really proud to have them on board. And also Stratasys direct manufacturing. They do 3D printing of various parts. So if you have a complicated system that needs to have a unique solution for manufacturing, I think they're a great sponsor, and we really appreciate having them on board. And of course, all of our annual sponsors. You know, Hood Tech has been a longtime sponsor and such a great member of the community. They have supported this industry and were there at the beginning of it and helped found the industry as we know it. And so Hood Tech is a great sponsor. We really appreciate that. And of course, Northwest UAV, who allows me to spend some of my time supporting this and supporting the industry in this way, and also has been a very long time member. In fact, part of the founding members of this Hood Tech and Northwest UAV. And to our gold sponsors, we have Northwest Aerospace Magazine, a great place, a source for information about the industry and about the aviation industry. And of course, Nearspace Corporation, the Tillamook UAS range, great sponsors out there and doing some great work in the industry. EPB&B Insurance, they are definitely key in helping you manage your risk. Being in this industry and being in such a young industry, they have been supporting us for a number of years, and they're really great. And of course, Perkins Coie, who has been supporting with legal counsel a lot of the companies in this industry, and keeping us all out of trouble as best they can, or helping us get out of it when we get into it. And of course, technical tooling. And so if you need something complicated made, they're the folks to help you out. And our new sponsors, Orca Capital, and a longtime sponsor, Wendy Kellington. Really appreciate them all supporting us. Without these folks, this couldn't happen, and we really appreciate all of them. I also want to thank our keynote speaker. You get to hear from Brian here shortly. He is the president of AUVSI, the national, and has been key to really making this industry and painting a direction for this industry that the vision that he's had is just remarkable. So I look forward to seeing what he's got to say and maybe asking him a couple of questions myself. And so Your master of ceremonies will be Patrick Sherman, and I'm going to introduce Lori Brown, our executive director, and she will walk through some logistics with you and get us on track. So thank you very much for coming.
Hey everyone, welcome. So first we have, of course, our keynote, Brian, and then at 1:40 we have Rita Cascade Hunt, who's program manager with ArgenTech Solutions. Patrick will be giving us an update on the unmanned traffic management system. And then at 2:35, we have Bonnie Rayo, who's the co-founder and CEO of Rocket ML. And then at 3, we have our break. Okay, at 3:10, we have David Fleckenstein, Director of Aviation for Washington State. And then we have an exciting group, the Test Range Panel. So Kevin Tucker, Steve Chrisman, and Jeff Ratcliffe will be talking about some of the cool things that they're doing at the test ranges. So with that, I'd like to introduce your moderator, Patrick Sherman. So Patrick has so many awards that, it runs off the page. So we're going to edit down his bio here. But he is an internationally recognized expert in the drone community. And he's adjunct faculty member at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Worldwide Campus in the Department of Flight, and holds a level 3 remote pilot instructor certification through the AUVSI Trusted Operator Program. An FAA drone pro, he is the author of more than 150 published articles. He's known worldwide as Lucidity, which is, he's the public face of the Roswell Flight Test Crew YouTube channel. I'm sure everyone's seen him. Dedicated to drone technology with more than 6 million views and 30,000 subscribers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick. Thanks, Patrick.
Well, hello, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, although I miss being able to see all of you, as would typically be the case when I was serving as Master of Ceremonies at this one event. But we must make allowances for the current circumstances in the world. It's a real pleasure to introduce our first speaker for the day, Brian Wynn, the President and CEO of the AUVSI. I was about to say AUVSI Cascade, but no, this is the AUVSI National Organization, and he comes with a background commensurate with that role. He's been an instrument-rated pilot for more than 20 years. He's driven an electric vehicle for more than 15 years, holds a 107 certificate as a remote pilot in command of drones, and has just a wealth of experience across the transportation domain. Important to remember that AUVSI serves not only airborne robots, but also surface, marine, and subsurface aquatic systems. He's served in this role since 2015. And while in this role, he's taken many leading positions throughout our interface with the government, including the FAA's Management Advisory Council, the Drone Advisory Committee, and numerous other committees and organizations. Prior to joining AUVSI, he was the CEO of the Electric Drive Transportation Association, which was a promoter of electric vehicles, and also worked as the CEO for the Association for Automatic Identification and Mobility. So someone well suited to talk to us about the future of drones. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Brian Wynn.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Wynn, and I'm the President and CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. I appreciate the invitation to be with you here today. The Cascades Chapter Fall Symposium is a valuable opportunity to take stock of industry developments and challenges nationally and in the Pacific Northwest. I would like to give special thanks to Jeff Ratcliffe, Tom Hagen, Lori Brown, and the entire Cascades leadership team for being exemplary industry advocates. And thank you to Patrick Sherman for that warm introduction. While I would have preferred to connect with all of you in person, the pandemic has forced us to be creative. And I am glad that this group was able to pivot to an online forum and continue the event, as dialogue between stakeholders is critical to our industry continuing to move forward. So it is great to be with you today to share information and participate in the conversations on moving our industry forward. I'd like to start our discussion by talking about how our industry has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic and share some examples of AUVSI member companies going above and beyond to answer current challenges. At a time when human-to-human contact can be a threat to public health, key decision makers worldwide are seeing the value of unmanned systems in improving supply chain resiliency and offering a variety of socially distanced services. This presents unprecedented opportunities for our industry to not only innovate new technologies in response to the challenges, it also gives even greater impetus to drive policy changes that will fully integrate unmanned systems into supply chains. The solutions we are providing are not all entirely new, but they are novel. No other industry has the same capability to meet current needs like the unmanned industry. AUVSI is more dedicated than ever to advancing our industry by highlighting the best uses of unmanned systems to meet the needs posed by COVID-19. And we have mobilized to help enhance public perception of our technology. Recently at AUVSI, we launched a series of videos called Assuring Autonomy, and it's on the AUVSI website. The first 5 videos profile member companies using their technology to solve new challenges posed by the pandemic. These include Robotics Research, DJI, UPS Flight Forward, First Eyes, and Skydio. All are contributing technology solutions, and several have contributed raw manufacturing and supply chain assets to address the pandemic issues. Each of you can probably provide your own examples of our industry stepping up during these unprecedented times. I have never been more proud to be associated with this community. We know that if we can safely utilize unmanned systems to address new pandemic-related problems, it will go a long way toward easing fears and misunderstandings of the technology by the public. And we all know that a more positive public perception will be critical as UAS regulation continues to develop. Indeed, without public acceptance, regulators won't accommodate, let alone integrate drones into the airspace. So let's talk about regulations. About a month ago, we passed the 4th anniversary of the implementation of Part 107, which has governed the widespread use of UAS around the country. Operators have been flocking to the technology and clearly demonstrated its utility and safety. Of course, Part 107 is highly restricted flying, which is why the FAA allowed operators to apply for waivers from the rules to demonstrate additional safety cases. As of today, there are over 4,000 active FAA Part 107 waivers in use nationwide, allowing operators to conduct critical missions, including unmanned flights at night, over people, beyond line of sight, or in other conditions not permitted under Part 107. The waivers authorized demonstrate that operators are able to conduct innovative, expanded operations safely. And it is interesting to note some statistics about the operators obtaining those waivers. About 87% of the waivers granted so far are to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees and annual revenues of less than $1 million. These small businesses are using drones for infrastructure inspections, real estate photography, crop surveys to improve irrigation, and much more. Additionally, first responders across the country have received about 20% of all waivers granted to organizations, demonstrating the growing interest in UAS from public safety applications. All of this data is available for you to review at auvsi.org, by the way. With Part 107 waivers reaching an historic peak, and with demand even more urgent under the current COVID-19 situation, there is a clear demand for advanced unmanned flight operations. Earlier this year, the FAA's Drone Advisory Committee established a working group to work on recommendations on ways to streamline the waiver process. I chaired this working group, and we submitted substantive recommendations for the FAA on process, accountability, and transparency, which would significantly enhance the waiver process. AUVSI then stayed in regular communication with the FAA about process enhancements, advocating for much needed changes to the waiver process, which can also serve as a model for other processes, for example, including Part 135. Happily, Indications are that the FAA is taking action on many of the DAC's recommendations. The agency is rolling out meaningful changes to Part 107 waiver processes, and these include enhancing employee training for those involved and committing to new measures to enhance accountability and transparency. This type of industry-government collaboration on Part 107 is a big step in the right direction. Okay, so I can hear you thinking, that all sounds great, Brian, but how do we get beyond waivers to a permanent regulatory framework? Obviously, we need to continue to be committed to safety, and I'd like to take a few moments to outline a few initiatives that demonstrate how we project this commitment. In 2014, AUVSI and the Academy of Model Aeronautics, alongside the FAA, developed the Know Before You Fly campaign to ensure that people have the information and guidance they need to safely and responsibly operate their UAS within U.S. airspace. That campaign continues today and is expanding its reach globally with cooperation from international partners. In 2018, AUVSI developed its Trusted Operator Program, or TOP. This program, available to remote pilots and UAS training organizations, uses safety standards from the FAA and other regulatory bodies to certify the ability to operate safely and follow a comprehensive set of protocols. By providing a standard way to demonstrate UAS proficiency and safety, the TOP will help ensure the safe and sustainable advancement of the commercial UAS industry in the years to come. The use of UAS around airports is emblematic of the challenging world we live in. On one hand, UAS are becoming vital tools for runway and even aircraft inspection. On the other, alleged UAS incursions around airports have created disruptions and legitimate safety and security concerns. That's why AUVSI partnered with the Airports Council International North America last year to form a Blue Ribbon Task Force on UAS mitigation at airports. The task force was co-chaired by former FAA Administrator Michael Huerta and former Los Angeles World Airports CEO Deborah Flynn. The task force brought together a cross-section of stakeholders representing the airport, UAS, security, and manned aviation communities to refine practices and provide a policy framework to address this timely and critical issue. Last October, the task force issued its report with over 20 substantive recommendations. These include a recommendation that lawmakers extend critical, time-sensitive UAS interdiction authority to trained and state and local enforcement agencies tasked with safeguarding airports and the immediate surrounding areas. In short, we at AUVSI are persistently leveraging the expertise of our members and our ability to convene strong partnerships to advance safety, and not just in the air domain. About 2 years ago, AUVSI established the Maritime Advocacy Committee, or MAC, to parallel the organization's efforts on the air side. Since its inception, the MAC has successfully convened meetings with top leaders from the Navy, Coast Guard, and NOAA, as well as key staff on the Congressional Armed Services and Appropriations Committees. These meetings have helped guide the advocacy efforts of the committee and facilitate the integration of UMS technologies. We plan on replicating the strides we have made in the maritime space within the ground domain as well. And it goes without saying that especially now, there is a need for safe and reliable contactless delivery. Our industry is poised to answer that need, and in fact, many companies already are. As we are undergoing transformation from the labs to the streets, there is a heightened emphasis on social distancing, coupled with new pressures on supply chain logistics and delivery services. There are fundamental elements of the way that we will be impacted by the shift from human crewed vehicles to automated vehicles. With more than 36,000 Americans killed in car accidents every year, we have a unique opportunity to enhance safety by leveraging the learning of our members across domains. This is a defining feature of the unmanned systems and robotics community, which we convene at AUVSI. We are all things unmanned. Welcome to the Big Ten. And speaking of the Big Ten, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that next week is the opening of Exponential, our annual trade show and conference. Like this event, this year we are also conducting Exponential virtually. So if you have a new product announcement or want to access a host of new customers that are eager to deploy what you have, go to exponential.org and check out all the fantastic opportunities your AUVSI team has been working to make available to you. Let me wrap up by re-emphasizing that the future of unmanned systems is very promising, and the impact of our innovation on the world's economy, lifestyle, and society is transformative. Thank you for all you are doing to drive important innovations, even in the face of current challenges. I look forward to your questions.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Oh, I thought maybe you would stay up on screen. I can get my video going. There you are. All right. Here I am. There you are. All right. So I was, thanks very much for the talk. It was very informative, always exciting to sort of get that national perspective on what you're doing. So we do have a couple of questions here, and I'll confess the first one comes from me. Because you get around and see not only, you know, the air side, but the sea side and the land side, what is just the flat out coolest thing you've seen in the last 6 months, you know, be it hardware or software or just a new approach to a problem? What's really got your juices flowing that you've seen recently?
Wow, what a great question, Patrick. Geez, I'm going to put that one in my back pocket and ask everybody to ask me that question. I'll probably have a different answer, you know, week to week, and you know, the truth of the matter is, I'm not getting around as much these days. Who is? And it's frustrating because I know there's a lot going on out there. Look, as you pointed out in my introduction, I'm an electric vehicle guy. Right? I spent 10 years of my career working on electrification. Not because I'm an environmentalist. I'm a bit of a closet environmentalist, I'd say. But just because I love technology that changes infrastructure, or that plays in infrastructure and converges with other technologies and creates different ways of moving people and goods. I think the area that I've seen that most directly in is the UAM area, where you've got, I'm not sure, is it a supersized drone? It's kind of like the old Superman. Is a man? Is it a plane? You know, is it a supersized drone? Is it an electrified aircraft? What is that thing? And I'm super jazzed about what I'm seeing there. And partly, again, you know, we do hard stuff in this community. This is going to challenge a lot of different things about cities and so forth. So I look at that and I say, what does that say about the potential for our cities in the future? And the thing that got me very interested in electrification was that there was an overlap between the vehicles themselves, and I still drive an electric vehicle, and I try and sell other people on that, not because I'm a closet environmentalist, but because I just love instantaneous torque. But when you see that converge with things that fly, and we start, you know, we saw that first with small UAS, and now we're seeing it with supersized UAS. And I've got a great video that I love to show of this guy flying around that put a whole bunch of small UAS connected to a bathtub and started flying it around. I mean, this is Wright Brothers kind of stuff, but man, is it advancing quick. So as you can tell, that got me going on a whole bunch of different levels.
Yeah, no, it's an intriguing thing. And like you say, it almost sort of defies sort of easy categorization, you know, because is it a drone? Is it a drone with a person on board? Does that make it a regular aircraft? I don't know. But yeah, no, it's an exciting field. And next up, I suspect you'll end up having to make a referral, but we do have a pressing question from a member of our audience, Mark Zanmiller, who wants to know, they've been unable to register successfully for Exponential, which they think is quite odd, and just want to know if you were aware of any problems. And they've had a booth at the show for 10 years, so they're not newbies, but apparently they're having trouble. Have you got any tips, or is there anybody they can call at HQ to help them get this resolved?
Yeah, call me. send me an email, bwynne@auvsi.org. That should not be in any way, shape, or form challenging, and I want to get to the bottom of it right away.
All right. So, Mark, I hope you were on to hear that. So just go ahead and email Brian. And then another question we have is, after you mentioned the TOP program, the Trusted Operator program, as you were talking about sort of the confidence building measures AUVSI is taking. And I'm curious, how is TOP going in terms of the number of people and organizations participating? Is that, has it exceeded your expectations? Had you hoped to get further by this point? And do you have any future plans around promotion or sort of getting more people involved? Obviously, as a top level 3 guy, I'm very committed to the program myself, but I'm curious what the leadership perspective is.
And thank you, Patrick, for being one of the you're one of the pioneers. There aren't that many top level 3 folks, and part of the reason why we clearly started on the easier things was because we're only now getting to a place where that level of competence is required. And so it's, we're in this really weird space right now, which I kind of looked at in talking to people that were in the training arena, thought, okay, we've got to come together as a community and decide what are the levels of competence that are required for what. And sure enough, I mentioned in my talk the work that we did when I chaired the group that developed recommendations to improve the waiver process. One of the areas that the FAA folks, and I can't remember if they were people in flight standards or an ATO, because there are a lot of different people that get involved in that waiver process, not just the UAS integration office people. They had identified a gap out there. People would say, hey, I want to fly beyond visual line of sight. Here's the way I'm going to do that. Here are the mitigations that I'm putting in place for these additional risk factors. And by the way, you can trust me. I'm a really competent UAS pilot. Well, there was no way to test the veracity of that. They were looking at this and saying, how do we come up with a way to do it? And I went, that was the whole idea with TOP, right? It was to try and get that, get something going out there. And there's no pride in authorship here. We used a lot of protocols that were already out there and existed in the aviation community. We didn't have to make up a whole lot of stuff. And the way it was, there were, I think at one point, over 100 people involved in the development of those protocols. So you get to say, as one of the participants, how useful it is. I look at it as an organic approach to, let's make sure that we're talking to each other inside of the community to determine together what's required. If we can do that as a community and demonstrate that it's safe to fly when you have these particular competence elements, then the FAA should, the FAA generally will listen to that, right? Otherwise, we're going to be waiting for them to do that on top of regulations for flight over people, remote identification, regulations for flight, flights beyond line of sight, et cetera. It's all, flight over, houses and things like that for larger aircraft. So I'm not satisfied with anything that's going on in our community. I'm never satisfied with the speed of things, but I like to say that AUVSI tries to be out maybe a little bit ahead of the market so that we can enhance the execution of how these things are done. One of the things I learned a long time ago with technology and the introduction of technology into the marketplace is execution matters, right? Think of GM diesels, and I drive a GM vehicle, so I'm not picking on GM, but GM diesels set diesel back in this country a long way because they didn't execute that technology very well. I get smacked around by the GM people when I bring this up. But half of the vehicles sold in Europe, at least for the last couple of years, have been diesel vehicles. They can be really, really good and very fuel efficient vehicles, but they're not liked in the United States, and they're not popular in the United States, probably for a variety of reasons. I shouldn't lay it all at the door but it's a good example in my head anyway of a technology that didn't get executed the right way. We're looking out for what's missing out there, and one of the things that I think the community said was missing, and we tried to address that gap, was how do you determine what's a qualified and proficient pilot? That was the idea behind TOP, and I think it's got it's had a good start. It's still a start, like many things in this industry. We got a long way to go with it. But thank you for stepping in and being probably one of the first TOP level 3 certificate holders.
Yeah, I guess we're still a relatively rare breed, and I just as a pilot myself, a remote pilot and a manned pilot, but on the remote pilot side, I just wanted to say that I found the professional flight assessment course to be a sort of a worthy challenge. When I first looked it over, I thought to myself, this is a test. But when I actually got my hands on the sticks and flew it, that was a test. I mean, it takes some real skill to successfully execute that. So I think you guys developed a good set of standards there. Well, maybe, oh, hang on. Looks like we just got another question in from the audience. This is from Tom Hagan, past president of our chapter. Wants to let you know that, or as you know, he says, I'm sorry, I'm just going to read this to try and avoid paraphrasing it. As you know, the Cascade chapter has joined with 10 other industry organizations to leverage the immense resources of the Pacific Northwest to advocate and educate around unmanned systems. We also appear in the Oregon Aviation Working Group and the Washington Aviation Caucus to further the industry. What else would you recommend that the chapter do to take the next step and hopefully accelerate the progress we've already accomplished? Great question, Tom. Thank you.
It is a great question, and he's been a fantastic leader, and really appreciate his leadership. We are really focusing increasingly on grassroots. It's a bit of a shift. I want to say a little bit of a pivot. This is where chapters really make AUVSI. It's one of the defining features of AUVSI, frankly, and we want to build on that. Grassroots is going to be super, super important. I mean, at the small UAS level, and you could argue at most driving, it's all, it's like politics. It's all local, right? So and yet the big kahuna issue that we're all dealing with is public acceptance. Without public acceptance, as I indicated in my remarks, we don't advance. I mean, the regulators don't advance. We don't get support out of Congress, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of this boils down to really good stories, and we've got a ton of them right now in this extremely unfortunate situation. But our industry has stepped up and responded very well, and we're playing from strength in this environment. So, this is where local, where it matters that people, can kind of get behind it from a local perspective. And the force multipliers have got to be the partnerships. Nobody can do everything, particularly when it comes to education and spreading the word. But I think, focusing on more grassroots organizations, I think is going to be really, really important. And we're going to put some real specific ideas around how we think that can occur, and roll them out to the community, and how we can support from the headquarters perspective. But I think a lot of the really valuable work will get done at the chapter level.
Well, thank you. I think that's a very good answer to that question, and I'm certain we'll all be looking forward to, as chapter leaders, to find out what those specific points are. Well, Brian, that concludes our time with you today. So once again, I'd like to thank you very much on my behalf, the behalf of the entire chapter board and our members, for taking the time to be with us today. It's a real treat to be able to hear from you personally about what you see happening in the industry. So thank you very much. I will have to deliver the round of applause myself, because this format just doesn't lend itself to a room full, but thank you very much.
And I appreciate the invitation, Patrick, to you and all the leaders in the Cascades chapter. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. All right, Brian, again, thanks. We will see you later. And that next speaker is going to be, and Rita, I apologize in advance. I think I may mangle your name. I believe it's Rita Cascade Hunt. And she's the program manager at ArgenTech Solutions Incorporated, which specializes in operations, safety, and training for UAS. She actually reminds me a lot of me, if I may say so. Like me, she's a Fast Team Drone Pro, which is a volunteer organization assembled by the FAA to just help spread the word about how people can fly safely. Prior to going to work in the UAS industry, she was an aviation planner, pilot, and FAA certified airport safety inspector for the state of New Hampshire. There she's got me beat solidly. I won't lie about that. I also suspect she's quite a bit better of a aviator who sits inside her airplane than I am. But nonetheless, she graduated from Daniel Webster College with a Bachelor of Science degree in aviation flight operations and holds a master's degree in business administration. She's been teaching about UAS at, pardon me, New Hampshire University since 2019, and has been teaching also the use of UAS in disaster management for FEMA since 2016. Rita Cascade-Hunt.
Thank you all for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm out here in New Hampshire, and the topic of the presentation today is one that's current and seemingly, unfortunately, ever present in our lives, especially those on the West Coast these days, and that's wildfires. So during this presentation, I'm going to share some of the information on how UAS are being used during wildfire fighting efforts, based on our experiences, ArgenTech's experiences, working for and with the Department of Interior, and other local and state agencies. And I'm also going to showcase an impressive VTOL platform and sensor combination that's not well known in the industry yet, but it is currently being used for fire monitoring. I'd be remiss if I didn't give you a little background on ArgenTech Solutions. We are a New Hampshire-based company with an office in Vancouver, Washington, because if you're anybody in the UAS, or you want to be anybody in the UAS industry, you have to have an office in the Pacific Northwest, right? So ArgenTech is a veteran-owned small business. We were formed back in 2009. And our experience and expertise is managing complex technical services worldwide as they pertain to UAS services and operations. We have more than 50 remote pilots and instructors who provide the innovative cost solutions to our customers. And our company is 84% ex-military, or current or ex-military. So we take all that wonderful experience that these UAS operators get from the military side of things and bring them into the commercial world of unmanned aviation. Excuse me, our total UAS flight time, flight hours that we have among our operators and instructors is quickly approaching 100,000 hours. So we're small but mighty. That's ArgenTech Solutions. ArgenTech was one of 5 U.S. companies awarded an emergency and fire monitoring contract with the Department of Interior. And for this contract, we fly the ArgenTech FireEye, which was custom built to meet the specifications of this contract. So before I get into the platform itself, I just want to go over some of the fire monitoring industry and why UAS are being used and what they're being used for. So the majority of you are familiar with the 3Ds and why UAS technology is being targeted for tasks that are considered dull, dirty, and dangerous. I don't think anybody here would consider firefighting dull, but they are certainly dirty and dangerous. And the dangerous aspect is what we are trying to focus on as a UAS service provider. So how are UAS being used to augment and support manned aircraft and firefighters on the ground? Well, UAS are being used to remove the human aspect, right? To prevent accidents and unnecessary deaths whenever possible. UAS are being used to replace manned aircraft for scouting and mapping missions, which frees up flight crews and aircraft to be used for other purposes, either giving them a much needed break or help keep them out of harm's way by flying just a few less missions every day. UAS are being used to make the local, state, and federal budgets go further and last longer, right? An average cost for a UAV crew and support equipment is between $9,000 and $16,000 per day. A manned helicopter starts out at about $20,000 per day. A DC tanker can cost almost $1 million to be called out on a fire. So if UAS can be used for scouting and mapping missions, then the budget for the manned aircraft dropping water and retardant can stretch further during the suppression process. The biggest reason that UAS are being used, and it's kind of all tied in together, but it's basically to improve situational awareness and increase the overall safety of the firefighting efforts for all the people, for the firefighters and the civilians on the ground. So UAS with EOIR cameras are being used to fly in smoke, low visibility, zero visibility conditions, when maybe manned aircraft are grounded, or at night when manned aircraft are being maintained and crews are resting up for the next grueling day. The EOIR cameras allow for UAS to map the perimeters of the fire, even through heavy smoke. And what we're doing is providing better intelligence excuse me, to the GIS specialists, who are then able to help manage resources and coordinate the firefighting efforts for the next day. UAS are also used to locate hotspots in an area that has already burned, but because they kind of are moving on from that area, they could become issues in areas that they thought that were previously contained. So we want to look for hotspots to make sure that everything is safe, and if there is a hotspot, they can send somebody in there to contain it. Okay? UAS are also used as communication relays in rugged terrain. Long endurance VTOL platform is perfect for this task. It can stay on location for 8, 10, maybe 12 hours at a time. And that provides assistance for communication efforts. And unlike a tethered option, which is a good option, but unlike a tethered option, we can relocate it very easily just by changing the loiter location of the UAS. Okay? Multiple payloads and interchangeable payloads are another invaluable feature of UAS. If the data needs change, then so can the UAS payload. The UAS industry has demanded that sensor and payload technology keep up with its pace. And I am so impressed with how these technology companies have responded just with alacrity. These companies like Trillium, whose line of EOIR cameras are what ArgenTech carries on our platforms for fire monitoring missions, are just incredibly impressive. And I'm going to show you a short video of some of the features of the Trillium sensor that we use. And so I'm not talking over the video. I'm going to give you a little breakdown of it now. So the video is going to show you how the sensor is mounted. This is shown during the takeoff portion. You'll see, and then the middle part of the footage is an ICS manager in our mobile operations center directing our flight crews as to where he wants the camera to point or show. And then the end of the video is just an example of an EOIR video feed and how it can quickly and easily change between the two. right, did everyone hear? I don't know if someone can just give me a thumbs up. Did you hear the video on that? The last part doesn't have sound. But did everyone
I'll
hear the-
only speak for myself, but I don't think we got audio on that. So
Okay,
you may
all
need
right,
to illuminate a little bit.
I'll make sure that it's on for the next video. But there wasn't a lot of talking in that video. Basically, it was just the ICS manager asking for us to put the camera in certain places, and then you could hear the nice lawnmower engine taking off with the platform in the first video. But I'll make sure that it has it in the second video. And I do apologize. I wanted to show you guys some of the fire lines, some of the fire footage, but it hasn't been released publicly yet. So unfortunately, you got our chief pilot in a pickup for your video of petroleum. Okay. All right. So now that we've discussed, why UAS are being used for fire monitoring purposes, I'm going to move on to a topic that I think is very reflective of the conference theme, which is leading the way in UAS technology. Now, to do this, I'm going to go over some of the UAS platform specifications that we had to meet in order to meet the needs of our DOI contract. So state and federal entities might have their own list of specifications, and in fact, I know that they do, but since those are going to vary, I'm going to stick to what we know and talk about the DOI specification list so you can understand a little bit of the challenging nature of some of these UAS flight operations. So the min spec and the target specs vary greatly, as you can see. We consider the target specs the dream big column. They may be difficult to achieve, but they push the UAS manufacturers to demand more from their suppliers and their engineering teams. This is one of the reasons the industry is moving forward so rapidly is customer demand. So now that we've all seen these, we've all seen the RFIs that come out, or requests for information that come out, that we roll our eyes at because the RFI is looking for companies who can, provide RQ9-like capabilities and a rotor platform and still be under 55 pounds. That's dreaming a little bit too big, but it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Somebody's going to meet that demand eventually. So here you can see the DOI specs for the platform. There are many more. They have to do with ground terminal, mobilization, and data, but I just wanted to focus on the aircraft specs for this presentation, and that's to point out the reasons why we had to build our own UAS platform to meet the requirements. So there's very few platforms available for commercial, meaning non-DoD contractors in the industry currently that can meet these performance specs. And then add in the ground terminal mobilization and data specs, and that number drops even further. So don't get me wrong, being forced to build our own platform was one of the best things that could have ever happened to ArgenTech. There's nothing like getting strong-armed into something you don't want to do to discover how good you really are at something. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the platform that I've been slightly bragging about while we're throughout this presentation. This is the ArgenTech FireEye. Did everyone see the airport that we were flying at in the video? Well, it was Pendleton because that's where we're doing our flight testing. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. We do have a question from the audience, which is, what was your biggest challenge during the, well, I'm going to go ahead and call it the current fire season, because nobody's told me it's over anyway.
Yeah. The biggest challenge so far has been, honestly, for us, it's been staffing. Because we have 50 operators, they're not all at the same place at the same time. So, and they're deployed worldwide on several different DoD contracts. And honestly, organizing them and getting a training program, I shouldn't say this, this is my biggest, getting a training program on a platform that was just built. You know, I come from the manned aviation world where we have, you know, everything laid out to you in regulations, and as long as you follow the regulations, you're good to go. So the unmanned aviation world doesn't have that yet. So basically, we're trying to take the unmanned platform and training and kind of follow along with the manned aviation parameters, and that can get a little, I wouldn't say messy, but a little bit difficult. And I think that's been our hardest thing. But we have some really well-trained operators now. I know we've kind of got over that hump.
Excellent, excellent. Well, well, thank you so much for sharing. And honestly, I would love to sit down with you for like an hour and just discuss this, because it looks like a remarkable piece of technology. And I just love that you sort of built it yourselves to address this problem. You know, hey, you know, we need to meet these objectives. We're just going to select an aircraft, or we're just going to build an aircraft that's going to help us accomplish that. I mean, that's a real can-do spirit, which I certainly appreciate. So Rita, thank you so much for being here today with us. Once again,
you're welcome. And thank you. And if you, I mean, we're out in Pendleton test flying right now. So if anyone wants to go out and say hi, you're more than welcome.
Really?
Yeah.
Outstanding. There's my camera. I will, again, because I'm the only one who can see it, I will personally offer the round of applause, which you should deservedly be getting from the whole room. But Rita, thanks so much, and thanks for sharing. It's a very cool piece of technology, and obviously a critically needed application at this time. So thank you. Which work just like it does today through the LANCE system, the low altitude authorization and notification capability. Now, with UTM fully in place, VLOS pilots are going to get a couple of options they don't have already, which is they may choose, they are not required to, but they may choose to share their intent with the uncrewed traffic management system. They may say, I'm going to be flying over in this park for an hour at or below 400 feet, and there you have it. So everyone else in the system will know, hey, there's a recreational operation occurring, you know, within 1/8 of a mile of this location. And then also, our VLOS operators may choose to monitor the UTM to enhance their situational awareness. If, for example, I'm out there flying my foam airplane at my local park, as I often do, I've got my cell phone tuned into this, I may get a blink that an Amazon delivery drone is going to pass directly overhead right at 400 feet in 2 minutes. And so I might choose to land my foam airplane or exercise care to keep it low. So that's what participation as a VLOS applicant looks like. For the crewed pilots, you basically have two modes of operation here. You can either participate in a passive or an active manner. If you're participating passively, you get UTM data to improve your own situational awareness. You get the recreational pilot who's flying at 200 feet or below. You get the drone at 300 feet flying a survey mission. Obviously, as a crewed aircraft pilot, you're hopefully never going to be as low as these missions are, but nonetheless, you know they're happening. So it's just one added layer of information that you have access to as a pilot. You may also choose to be an active participant in this system. And if you do that, you share your intent with the UTM network to enhance overall situational awareness. You say, I am going to fly this route at 1,000 feet AGL, you know, from noon to 1 p.m. And then all the unmanned operators will be aware that you're going to be in the vicinity. So could be useful, obviously enhances our overall situational awareness. Now, of course, what everyone is waiting for in this. That is the UAS Beyond Visual Line of Sight Participants. What does this look like? How does this work? Well, I hope it goes without saying, you're going to have a certified pilot, you're going to have a registered aircraft, and you're going to have remote ID in place. That's going to be sort of the bedrock requirement. And then if you're going to fly in controlled airspace, you're going to need authorization, possibly through LANCE, but likely a sort of enhanced version of LANCE. And the next thing you're going to require is performance authorization for the operating environment. I'd never heard the term performance authorization before, so I had to study up on it. And what this basically means is that the FAA may require additional hardware or capabilities in your UAS before you're allowed to perform BVLOS operations in certain areas. Let's say you're going to fly, you want to fly BVLOS through uncontrolled airspace. That may not require much. You may just be able to attest to that. But now let's say you're going to fly BVLOS through controlled airspace. Now the FAA is going to want to know that you've got some sort of sensors on board that allow you to detect and avoid other air traffic. We don't even know yet, frankly, but there's going to be some sort of sensors, some sort of systems that are going to be required as part of it in order for you to fly in those environments. And so once you bolt whatever this wonderful sensor is to your aircraft, you will then receive a performance authorization from the FAA to go along with your airspace authorization. The next thing you're going to have to do is share your intentions with UTM and receive a block, or what they call a volume, of 4-dimensional airspace. That is, they're going to say, okay, for the 5 minutes this Amazon drone is transiting from its warehouse to downtown Portland, this block of airspace from 300 to 400 feet defined as a corridor, of this many feet width and vertical height is that drone's and that drone's alone. And then finally, the system is going to allow us to negotiate with other UAS operators to manage and deconflict that airspace. Like I said, this is essentially what already happens every day in Class G airspace. Now it's something we're going to be doing as UAS pilots flying BVLOS. And again, this is all going to take place by a computer. So there you have it. Now, of course, this is the time when I ask for questions, but I notice, I've managed to fill up nearly all my time. And I say questions, that's great, because I've got a ton of them myself. All right, next up, we are going to be hearing from Vinay Rao, who's the co-founder of Rocket ML, which, as we established over the break, is not actually a rocket company, but is instead a machine learning company. Vinay has been a serial entrepreneur in the machine learning field and launched Rocket ML in 2007. He has a passion for delivering quantifiable benefits of artificial intelligence to business and society. So with that, I'll hand it over to Vinay.
All right. Patrick, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm probably going to talk the least amount about unmanned vehicles as any other presenters today. And my other objective is to mess up all the acronyms you guys have been very comfortable with. I might say, instead of UAS, I might say UE. So pardon me. As Patrick introduced, I lead a company called Rocket ML. We make machine learning faster, and that's the analogy of rocket there. We don't actually build any rockets. So if any of you have hands-on experience doing machine learning, one of the things you would have experienced is that it is a very, very slow process. Mainly because the data sizes are so big when you have to do machine learning. And even if you have to do simple things, operations like transposing a matrix, that you do it very quickly on an Excel spreadsheet, but on a big data, if you want to do it, machine will take about 30 minutes to finish the task. And that is not a great experience. And so we built a product called Rocket ML, which does it in a few seconds. So that's the analogy we use. today, as it is, I'm not going to talk about my company at all. We'll talk about AI and as it relates to unmanned vehicles. And I'll cover the basics of machine learning a little bit, and then leave you with some of the breakthrough techniques that you should consider whenever you are ready to start doing machine learning within your own organizations. So, about my company itself, we are based in Portland, Oregon. We're funded by NSF and NIH. We focus on machine learning, as I said. My talk is going to have 3 separate sections. I'll cover briefly about AI and kind of get everybody on the same page. And I'll touch upon the UV segment. As I said, I've heard all of you use the acronym UAS. I'm going to learn, but in this presentation, I'm calling it UV segment. And then I'll go back to where I'm comfortable. That is, I'll share 4 different breakthrough methods that you should consider whenever you're ready to do machine learning within your organization. First, let me start with why we're talking about machine learning. Because it is working. In 2005, both for computer vision applications as well as natural language, the machines started achieving accuracy that are equal or better than humans. Now they have surpassed the humans in their ability to recognize an image, or variety of other tasks humans do it very naturally, easily. It doesn't mean that machines are any better than humans. It just means that for a certain narrow aspect of a task, machines have gotten better than humans. And that can be quite useful for many applications. And in most of the companies that we work with, as soon as they start working on building AI models, working on the machine learning, quickly that department becomes the center of innovation. And that's very important to remember. It takes time to develop that culture, and sooner you jump into that area, the better it is. Second critical piece, the reason for jumping onto AI is that end of the day, it is a software. I've been around software development for about 25 years now. In software, nobody wants to work on somebody else's code. And as the code base becomes bigger and bigger, it becomes a really difficult thing to manage. So this is a quote from Jeff Dean, head of Google Brain. When they converted their Google Translate application from a purely software-driven application to a machine learning-driven application, they were able to reduce 500 lines of code to just 500. That is extraordinarily transformative. Even if you're not a software engineer, you're a hardware engineer or a technologist, you would love working with a software engineer who does this. So those are 2 critical reasons. Now, as far as the machine learning itself, it's essentially a 2-step process. There is a learning process that happens offline, and then there is an online process called the decision process. Sometimes it's called inferencing process. And it could be about an object detection, image classification, or recommendation systems. It could be a variety of different tasks that the machine learning systems can execute, but it's essentially a 2-step process. Now, how does it compare to how we operate as humans. We know ourselves really well. Humans are essentially an integrated system. There is no machine learning system that is as integrated as we are. We sense, we learn, we process, and we respond to the real world almost intuitively, instantly. We do that for a variety of tasks, thousands and thousands of tasks, whereas the machine learning doesn't work like that. There is, like I said, there's an offline process which is called learning process, which is intended to build the models of the real world. And that model is deployed into an edge device. In the case of UV, it's your UV, where the model is put, and it is responding to the real world sensors, but it's not necessarily learning very much. Even though there is research going on how to put the learning components into the edge, but the learning components are at the moment very limited. Now the UV segment is also a perfect match for AI solutions for two reasons. One is unmanned vehicles are in the real world generating tons of data. Right? To do an AI solution, you need a lot of data, and especially the data about the real world, real time, is extremely valuable. And in your segment, you get that data in abundance, I would think. And also the second reason is that the problem definitions have to be clear. At least in the unmanned vehicle segment, the hierarchy of problems are very clear. And because of that hierarchy, it's much easier to get an alignment within the organizations what problems to work on. Unlike in a bigger corporation where the problem definitions get obscured because the organizations get very big, cross-functional, and complicated. So it's a great segment to get started. And if you haven't already doing machine learning, I would strongly recommend that. Now, what can you do with machine learning? At a highest level in the UV segment, it's very simple definition, right? You want to get from point A to point B without causing a damage to lives or property. It's as simple as that. But underneath that, there are tons of applications, tons of ways you can improve the processes and improve the performance. For example, perception, that's an easy thing to understand. And human beings, we are very vision focused. Our world is very visual in nature. So with cameras, you capture the data and make use of the data to build a variety of services. Likewise, there are a number of things for which machine learning can be applied. Battery design, material design. I'll touch upon the material design a little bit later. So on and so forth. It's an endless number of things that you can work on as long as you have the data and a problem definition. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize in this talk is that everything is actually data. It's only limited by our imagination, what we want to detect, what we can detect and sense. Otherwise, everything is data, just collect it. Don't worry about it, what you're going to do with it. Just collect it first, and it'll become the most valuable asset you ever had. With that kind of basics, I want to shift to the third topic, which is what are the breakthrough machine learning methods that are going on right now. First one is what I call the traditional deep learning. I'll talk about it on the next slide a little bit. And the field is growing so fast, the deep learning itself is considered a modern method. It's already becoming what is considered legacy. The new frontier in deep learning is something called deep unsupervised learning, and where the data doesn't have to be labeled or annotated, and the machine does most of the work. And then there are methods that still in early research called reinforcement method, where they're trying to combine offline learning as well as online learning. By combining those two, you would get the so-called ideal integrated robotic systems. And then the new kid on the block is the scientific machine learning, which is physics-based approaches. I'll talk about it on a slide just a couple of minutes later. So now, very briefly again, deep learning methods, as I said, is the most successful machine learning method in the history. And they came, neural networks itself has been around for decades, but they started becoming successful only around 2011, in the past decade, when the machines, computers became a lot more powerful. The catch here is that every data sample you get, you need to have a labeled data in order to develop an optimum model. And that's the biggest limitation of the deep learning. There are other minor challenges with the deep learning, but it is called supervised learning. And the term supervision applies to the fact that you need the labels. Labels, other word for the labels is annotation. And for example, if there is an image of a dog or a cat, someone has to label them. It's a dog, it's a cat. Likewise, it's a hexagon, square, a triangle. And then based on those examples, machine will learn and start and develop the ability to predict something. When a machine encounters a cat, it says it's a cat. So that is the definition of supervised learning. Now, there is this new type of learning called unsupervised learning, and sometimes also there is a variety of unsupervised learning. The most recent one is what the industry calls self or semi-supervised learning, where you start with unlabeled data and develop some kind of a model and test that model with a small fraction of labels. The recent work that we have done, we've shown that with this approach, you can achieve accuracies better than supervised methods. So what that means is that you save a lot of cost of labeling the data. Labeling the data is a very manual process, and it's not only time consuming, but also there's a significant cost involved with it. And only downside to this approach is that you consume a lot more compute to achieve that accuracy. However, compute costs are much cheaper. Then the reinforcement method, this was a research that came out a couple of weeks ago. Sony and others worked on this reinforcement method. This is on a gaming system, but not any real world system, but it's still impressive. For this system, they were able to demonstrate accuracies equivalent to supervised deep learning methods, which is a huge breakthrough. And hopefully we can extend this method to some real world applications. Last topic in the world of leading edge machine learning is this what we call topology optimization using deep learning methods. This on the left-hand side is the bracket you would have done in the past in absence of optimization technique. So you don't really worry about how much material you put in here. You over design and hope that it never fails. But or you do the welding and get the shape you want. With the 3D printing capabilities, you can actually calculate the best profile of a bracket from using 3D deep learning methods. And based on that, you can manufacture it using 3D. We've been working with this with a university collaborator. That method also works for designing drones, because in anything that is flying, the weight becomes a factor. You need to reduce the weight. In the case of oil and gas, you need to reduce the size of the manifold. This is actually a real system that an oil and gas company developed. We are helping this company improve from even here using the deep learning system, another 50% reduction in size. Several applications of this, not only the bracket designs, but also in design of the shoes and hip implant, and the number of projects we're working with the industry using this deep learning based method. So last point I want to make here is that don't forget the upside of AI. AI is basically based on data. And as you have more data, you will build better machine learning models. And as those models get incorporated into products, the customers will start using the products more and more, and that will result in more data, and that will result in better product. So it's a virtuous cycle that is very difficult for your competitors to beat. So I strongly recommend everybody to jump on this if you haven't already jumped on this and get going. This is a very early phase for sure in the AI world, but it's worth making an investment early. In summary, what I want to say is that AI is transformative. It's here to stay. And it can change the culture of a company. It has already transformed many segments. My last parting point is that start collecting data at every opportunity you get. And don't delay that. And even if you are not willing to start an AI program, it's actually a program. Just start collecting data from your UAS, whatever camera systems that you have, start collecting data. With that, thank you very much. And I still have, I think, 4 minutes for any questions.
You do indeed, Vinay. Thank you very much. And we've actually had a couple come in while you've been talking.
Nice.
And this first one, I imagine you must, I mean, given the profession you work in, you must be asked constantly. But that is about the HAL 9000 scenario. What would you say to people who are afraid of artificial intelligence, either taking their jobs or cutting off their supply of oxygen?
That's a very good question. It's the most common question. I'll share my personal views. There are a lot of philosophers. This is a most interesting topic for even philosophers, right? Even though this is a technical topic. My personal opinion is that we as humans, we have designed this world for the humans, and that will never change. Sure, there is a negative impact. Sure, there is a short-term impact. All that will happen, but majority of the things that people do is for the good. And as a result, we will navigate this in a way that is a net positive for the world.
All righty. And then another question which has come in is, you mentioned, by the way, I love the notion that you as the business owner should be thinking about AI, you should be implementing it right now. It's our machine learning, sort of emphasizing its critical importance. And I think that's an intriguing message. But the question is, you mentioned, even if you're not going to start a machine learning program right now, start collecting data. And I'm not an expert in this subject, but I have heard that you know, even your average self-driving car, you know, going from here to grandma's house is going to generate like 20 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes, just reams and reams of data, which would quickly overwhelm sort of conventional storage solutions. I guess both as a tip for people who do want to start collecting that data, and just sort of as a general question for, you know, for a person who works with vast tracts of data, how do you manage, you know, what must soon be petabytes of data?
That is true. I think I wouldn't recommend if you are, I wouldn't recommend collecting streaming data in its raw format. Even you know, self-driving car companies who have a front-facing cameras these days, most of the modern cars do have front-facing cameras. Even though they have a camera, they don't collect the raw data. What they collect is the features that they're seeing from the camera. But there is a catch there, which I appreciate the difficulty here. To collect the features, you need a machine learning model to collect the features. So for example, if you want to collect all the potholes that are there as you're driving, let's say 20 miles a day or whatever, how many potholes you saw, that's a very small data set actually, but that's a valuable data set. If you found, you know, 20 potholes versus, you know, governments are very concerned about this, right? It's a lot cheaper to collect the data this way than through humans.
Interesting stuff. All right. Well, Vinay, thank you so much. I believe that brings us to 3 o'clock and the close of your presentation, but absolutely fascinating stuff. And I think one of the great values that we get from the symposia that we hold twice a year is that it's not all, you know, I could talk about, you know, UAS just absolutely endlessly, but most of the people here probably know what I'm going to say already. But to hear from somebody who comes from a slightly different background, I think is just incredibly valuable. I really appreciate the insights you shared with us. And frankly, it's already gone a little ways towards sort of transforming the way I think about machine learning. So, who's the director of the Washington State Department of Transportation Aviation Division. He has over 27 years of aviation experience stemming from his current position, his previous role as an airport director, as well as an Army aviation officer and pilot. As the head of the aviation division, he focuses on a broad portfolio that goes well beyond UAS, including airport infrastructure, addressing emerging aviation technology, coordinating aviation emergency services, and supporting aircraft owners and dealers with the registration process. He holds an undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Southern Carolina and master's degrees, and I must say this is truly a unique pairing, a master's degree in adult education from South Dakota State University and in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College. David, I suspect you are among a very handful in our country of 330 million people who have that specific pairing of master's degrees. So I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that and also about drones. So welcome to the floor, David. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I think those degrees are a result of Army life, when it was what it boils down to.
Makes sense. All right, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So today I'd like to give a kind of an update on what WASDOT has been doing in the UAS space and where we see some things coming together with the different emerging technology that we see coming to fruition little by little. The WASDOT program itself is really a decentralized operation. Our aviation division provides oversight of the functions of all the things that we have going on within the UAS programs across the regions. Really, that's a part of program management, helping coordinate the training for what we call our region coordinators, helping with policy review, and then implementation of the program. The coordinators are really our stewards across the regions that execute the UAS program for the department. We have 6 regions within WASDOT, and then within those, we have focus areas on ferries, bridge and structures, SR 520 currently, maintenance, aviation emergency services, and environmental planning. There are 40 Part 107 operators right now across WASDOT and 18 small UAS platforms. And I'll tell you, there's a variety of different platforms due to the, the different things that they perform with those platforms, along with a myriad of different software bundles as well. The foundation of our program is based on the policy that derived out of our Secretary's executive order that pretty much tells our WASDOT employees what to do in regards to UAS and how it gets implemented. We have a guidebook that we refer to as the SUAS User's Manual that assists all of those coordinators and our UAS users across WASDOT. And of course, it's all based on federal regulations as a part of the FAA. So we're currently in the process of updating that user's manual based on some of the changes that we've seen with the FAA. We have recently adopted a program coordinator position, and it's Eddie Hensley, and Eddie's on the call with me today. This has been kind of a aspiration of the department to do more in the UAS space. Before, we pretty much took an FTE and assigned that to an individual to help out, get it developed. And now Eddie provides kind of a full-time expertise that he brought with him from the military as in the Army, and is now overseeing the program on a full-time basis. Now, you see a lot of things on this slide, and really this is all about coordination. There's no effort by WASDOT to have some kind of authority over another group, but really what we found is, having a coordinator moving forward is really how we're going to get to kind of the next step in being able to deploy the assets and use them as they were coordinating with industry partners, the Center of Excellences, test centers, educational entities, of course, federal and local entities, the Department of Commerce and others, we think is the best way moving forward that we can coordinate different efforts across the UAS landscape. So as a part of all this, what we're seeing is a lot of things coming together. And when I say all things coming together, I'm really referring to all things electric as we electrify transportation. The WASDOT is also involved in an electric aircraft working group. And that working group right now is conducting phase 2 of a study that is delving into, okay, how would we bring electric aircraft to the state, and what are the potential aspects for the state? So evaluating current technology that's out there and how it will affect transportation. What's the environmental sustainability of those platforms that we're seeing, and what does it mean for the economies across the state? We're looking at airport infrastructure and improvement needs that would need to be conducted to accommodate electric aircraft. What we're finding is it's great to say, yeah, we're going to electrify the transportation system. It's another thing to think about what that means for the grid and the requirements that would need to be in place for all these different areas if we're going to totally electrify our transportation system. And then what is the forecasted demand for electric propulsion when we're talking about the potential for regional passenger service in Washington State? There has to be demand there for us to really delve into it and bring it to fruition. And finally, what the program aims to do is to identify 6 airports that would be in a good position at some point to facilitate electric aircraft. And when I say electric aircraft, there are a lot of things that go into that. So we're looking at large drone platforms. We're looking at small electric aircraft for educational training or pilot training. We're looking for electric aircraft that will provide commuter service. There's a long list of things that you can imagine that would fall into that category. So when I talk about emerging technologies, the one thing we're seeing is there are a lot of parallels in what's going on between UAS, the advent of urban air mobility, and NASA's term advanced air mobility, and some of the things that we're doing within our electric aircraft working group, whether it's hybrid electric aircraft or full electric aircraft. And from our viewpoint, we're very interested in what's the future potential for passenger and cargo transportation with some of these platforms. But what I think is key to all this is, when we think about the opportunities to bring these to fruition, it's really important that we think about from the public's eyes. What are the things that they want to see? Well, they want to see a safe platform. They want to see something that's going to be a sustainable system. And when I say the system, we're talking about the aviation system as a whole, as well as, are these platforms sustainable that we're bringing to the market? And there's a large voice now that wants us to look at the environmental aspects of it. So in one area that we're involved in right now is looking at expanding capacity for a new airport within Washington State. And some of the resounding themes that keep coming back to us are people want aircraft to be quieter. They want to see less pollution. And so these are things that, we have to take in consideration as we look to build out or even bring these things to markets across the state. How are we going to do that and meet the needs of the public? And so that gets to the community-friendly aspect of it. The thought of having unmanned systems, in neighborhoods, which could either be package delivery platforms, they could be small commuter or air taxis. How do you do that while you meet the concerns of the public? And then finally, people want something that's going to be affordable. So how do you bring something to fruition that's affordable by the typical citizen of Washington State? And the other thing that we think is important is that these systems, the smaller UAS systems right now, are really paving the way for UAM and advanced air mobility. So when we talk about things like airspace management, infrastructure, the see and avoid systems, et cetera, all of those things that are going to get incorporated into UAS, to a certain extent, will get incorporated into the bigger platforms. So, we try and look at things, I think, with a little bit of patience right now in regards to what the FAA is doing in comparison to other countries. People will think, well, are we getting behind? Well, yes and no, but I think it's really important to understand the fact that we want to get things right from the get-go, because that's how we're going to get public support for bringing, again, these platforms to fruition and across our state and across the nation as well. One aspect that I think is really interesting right now is the Community Air Mobility Initiative, or CAMI. That's under the watchful eye of Yolanda Wolf, who's doing a great job of thinking about, okay, how do we incorporate things like urban air mobility into both the urban and the rural landscape? And she's really looking at it from a community standpoint. So staying ahead of the challenges through community engagement and collaboration with jurisdictions and community leaders is really a great way to get the conversation started and to figure out what is it that people are interested in and what are they going to want to see as we try to build out where these platforms will land and take off from. And a part of that goes back to what I had mentioned before, is the assessment of the infrastructure. What are those requirements to be able to even facilitate some of these things? We know that the electrical requirements could be quite great if you take in consideration all of the other things like ferries, the potential for trains, ground vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So when you try and combine all those efforts, how are we going to do that? So that's where you go back to the planning process. And again, it's great to have CAMI looking into this and part of the overall team that's doing this within the state of Washington. Some of the challenges that we see in the near term in regards to the operating environment is, what is the true status or state of some of the technology? You see a lot of things in the news and a lot of, for lack of better terms, promises on when things will come to market. But some of those things have yet to be seen, and they've got to go through a pretty rigorous certification process. And coupled with that are, what are the infrastructure solutions? So the regulatory landscape, I think, is very important. Again, I think we need to apply some patience when it comes to the regulations that are being set in place now that we're going to have for the future for years to come. And, it's being shaped by what we're seeing with small UAS, but a lot of that's going to get applied to the bigger platforms. And finally, the cost of bringing some of these things to fruition itself is quite substantial. And we've seen, companies that have kind of rolled back, where they sit in their planning, their R&D, and eventual production. They've had to take a step back given the status of air transportation right now. So some of those impacts that we're seeing, obvious impacts from COVID-19 pandemic, just within air transportation alone, we're really not sure how the recovery is going to occur for air passenger service. Although there's been, while there's been a precipitous decline in air passenger service, air cargo service has kind of gone through the roof and has been one of the saving graces. And I think one of the good things that have come out of the pandemic is things that the FAA might not have said yes to in regards to unmanned systems and their operations. There have been some allowances that have probably put us a little further forward than we likewise would have been without the pandemic. There needs to be consumer confidence in our air transportation systems, and that just goes back to right conditions and what is the public perception of this emerging technology. I think in the near term it's going to be challenging as we look to spend funds, and what funds that we do have, those priorities that we think may be important within the aviation world may not be important to the overall public when we just look at all the challenges that we're going to be faced from the economic decline that are associated with the pandemic. And finally, the most important thing is a safe integration into the existing airspace control infrastructure. If you imagine everything that currently takes place with aircraft, and you introduce additional UAS platforms, and on top of that, AAM, so there's going to be a lot of policy making. There's going to be a lot of things that we continue to see with airspace management, or UTM, unmanned traffic management. And I think that, some of those third-party providers that are kind of setting the conditions across the United States, it's going to be interesting to see, who rises to the top and how we incorporate those within our local communities and Washington State as well. So that's kind of a quick update to what we see going on, Patrick, across our own landscape. It's exciting. But again, I think there's a lot of unknowns that are still out there that remain to be seen. So there's our contact information. There's Eddie's contact information, our new coordinator. And we'll gladly take any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you very much, David. To begin with, that was an interesting talk, and it sort of dawned on me that unlike here in Oregon, where we have a separate state Department of Aviation, obviously WashDOT handles that and the road, so you guys have got a very full plate there. Anyway, I do have a question here from Tim, and I'm going to take a guess at the name Tim Torbar. Torber, something like that. And he would like to know, and I'll just read his question verbatim, the FAA region of control is sometimes described as from the tip of a blade of grass all the way to the outer atmosphere. But regional zoning within local municipalities has a big impact on aerial activity. Is there a statewide approach to integrate UAS with local zoning strategies? And by the way, I think it's a great question. And I'm also glad I don't have to answer it.
Yeah, hey Tim, how are you? I think that what we're trying to do right now is, again, apply a little patience. So we are waiting to see what comes out of the current rulemaking that's taking place within the FAA. And if you talk to, as you probably know, if you talk to many of the UAS operators, most of the decision-making regarding that type of zoning type issues are initially going to come from the FAA headquarters, and as the rulemaking plays out. And I think what we will have to figure out for the state and on a regional basis is, are there things that should be done here within the state in terms of policies or rules that would be in line with the FAA rulemaking, but would not be opposed to it? So, there's probably more to that in terms of what we can do within the state jurisdiction as opposed to the FAA. And what I will say is, there's been a lot of discussion on airspace in general, and whether or not the airspace will push, or whether or not the FAA will push some of that airspace down to the states to manage. That remains to be seen. And I think that if you look across the nation, there are some states that are better prepared to do that, and some want to do it. In Washington State, we're not currently prepared to do that. But if some of these third-party providers, if they're allowed to do what they want to do through the FAA, I think that could be a way ahead for the state if we're asked to have more involvement in airspace management. I hope that answers your question, Tim.
Yeah, well, I would, Tim, you've got David's contact and also Eddie's contact information on your screen right now. So if you'd like to follow up, I'd certainly encourage you to take that information down. Otherwise, David, it just falls to me to thank you very much for participating in our symposium today, and to thank you for the very informative talk. It's always interesting to hear what's happening in this space. For me, at least, especially in like UTM and electric propulsion, because if it weighs more than 5 pounds, I generally stay away from it. So it's always good to hear what's happening on the other side.
Well, thank you, Patrick. We appreciate the opportunity.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. Okay, take care. Thank you very much. Falls to me now to introduce our final session for the day, which is our panel discussion regarding the test range, 3 test ranges we have, which are active here in Oregon. And I have the pleasure of introducing the director of each of these test ranges. If I'm being honest, they've each got pretty formidable resumes, so I'll just give you the highlights as I'm introducing them. Steve Chrisman has served as Pendleton's Economic Development Director and Airport Manager since 2013. I spent some time in economic development in my career. I appreciate that the pick and spade work that involves, but he's had great success since the Pendleton UAS test range has been established. Just this year, 2020, they've had over 2,000 UAS operations, and the city leases out over 60,000 square feet of space at the airport to 7 UAS companies, which together combine to have over 60 full-time employees. And for a rural economic development project, that is a spectacular result. And he's got plenty more going on besides. I'm sure he'll tell us about it during our talk. Next, continuing in no particular order, we have Jeff Ratcliffe, who's the Chief Technical Officer at Northwest UAV, which has recently established its own flight testing facility, which is very exciting to see. I've been out and take a look at it. Looks like a great place to go flying. Jeff began his career in the United States Navy's Nuclear Submarine Service, and since 2012, he's been at Northwest UAV helping to grow and establish its engineering department, including the development of several major propulsion systems and the establishment of the company's AS 9100 certification. And then last but hardly least, we have Kevin Tucker, who's the president of Near Space Corporation, a position he's held since May 2019. He comes to the Tillamook test range after a substantial career at FLIR Systems until recently located with its headquarters here in Portland, in Oregon, Wilsonville, of course. He was the vice president and general manager of FLIR Systems Surveillance Group from 2010 to 2018. Where he led a group of approximately 1,000 employees scattered across Florida, Massachusetts, Montana, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Canada, Sweden, and the UK. So this is a man not unaccustomed to managing large operations. He, before joining FLIR, he was United States Army Field Artillery Officer and instructor at the U.S. Army Field Artillery Officer School, and is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our three panel members. And panelists, if you may, I'd like to ask you to begin by each describing sort of the current state of play at your each of your respective ranges. What's new, what's happening, and well, we're just anxious to hear about it. We'll see what questions develop.
Yeah, so we are flying on our test range. We've had, I believe, over 200 sorties on about a half a dozen different platforms. So a pretty active test range. And we have a COA up to 2,500 feet and a 5 nautical mile radius circle that we fly in. It's proven itself very valuable. You know, the part of the reason why we established it and why we established it in the location we did was its proximity to our factory. And so our ability to go out there and help a customer try fix and turn that design cycle around really quickly has really been quite the help. And the other aspect of it, and I think this is probably common across all the test ranges, is the opportunity to train first responders and new users of UAS kind of in a safe environment as well. And so we've been very successful getting some new folks doing new missions out there on the test range. So that's all right.
Excellent. Steve, reading left to right, you're next on my screen. So other than taking out a coin and tossing it, I guess that'll be cause to let you go next. What's happening out in Pendleton?
All right, thanks, Patrick. Well, ironically, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, we've never been busier. As you can imagine, anything where you're not touching other humans has gotten super popular. So UAS are booming as near as I can tell. We've got a new 18,000 square foot hangar that we just awarded the bid on. That's going to go up. We believe we have a tenant for that already, and we're building a $15 million UAS industrial park on the north side of the airfield, which is going to be pretty unique. Access to 10 gigabit per second internet, power, water, private entrance from the backside of the airfield for UAS workforce. And we're excited to see that's going to open up about 160 acres of shovel-ready ground for companies to site out there. So again, things are really going amazing. As economic development director, I feel bad for the rest of town. Main Street's doing a little rougher, but the airport's really in good shape, in great part, really almost exclusively because of the UAS range.
Well, all those UAS workers will have to eat and buy groceries and do all those other things somewhere. Perhaps you can steer them towards the downtown.
Doing a lot of takeout right now, unfortunately.
All right. And last but hardly least, Kevin, first of all, welcome to the show. And so tell us, please, what's happening out at Pendleton.
Thanks, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
You're coming through loud and clear.
Great. The test range out here, we're continuing to be extremely busy with the combination of our businesses, the high altitude flight test, as well as the test range business. So we've been investing in both, particularly on the test range part, some new equipment for sensing, radars, cameras, expanding some additional capability for our platforms, as well as processing behind that to help users better understand the effects and training. I think one of the things we're seeing quite a bit of is it's not simply, here's a UAS, we want to see if it works. There's some very complex systems that need to operate under varying different types of weather conditions, not always just nice weather. They have to be able to sense and avoid. They have to not run into things, including the ground and mountains. And particularly recently, for us, it's rather advantageous because the ocean's, right over there. A lot of operations that want to use the ocean for a test bed. So they're having it adjacent to our range, underneath our COAs, which extend at the higher altitudes to approximately 60 nautical miles. It's a lot of space out there to go out and get things done. So we've been doing quite a bit of coordination for that airspace with the DoD components, and out there doing quite a bit of work. So to echo what Jeff and Steve both said, there's a lot going on right now. And I think if anyone hears anything across these 3 different test ranges, you've got some pretty diverse types of terrains and capabilities and spaces. I don't think we're lacking for the ability for companies in the Northwest to be able to best leverage the UAS test ranges we have right here to ensure that they are taking their capabilities, whether it's platforms or processing and systems and UTM, and making sure it can safely operate in the national airspace system. We have that capability here.
Fantastic. Well, that actually brings me to sort of a question, and then I'll open it up to all 3 of you. And that is, I recall when the test ranges were initially introduced, you guys are all doing great, this is not a criticism, but the test ranges generally were considered sort of a squib load because they came with no money to do anything, and also no, no special authorization. If you wanted to make something of your test range, you had to go out and get the COAs and everything else you needed yourself. So, and then of course now we've got Part 107, all this other stuff. If I would like, it's perfectly legit for me to drive down to my local city park and fly a fairly robust, platform under Part 107. So what is it that makes test ranges attractive to customers, even as, more and more sophisticated UAS operations can occur almost anywhere?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give that a shot. It's the exceptions. It's if you're not under 107 rules, that's a significant part of it. Getting the exceptions is a lot simpler if you're in a controlled environment, on a controlled airspace, or not, it's not controlled airspace, but in a test range with the oversight of the test range, that sort of thing. The FAA is a lot more comfortable. All of us are part of the University of Alaska complex, and we've got tremendous support. Shout out to those guys for just really stepping up and always being there and able to pull off things last minute sometimes, and really facilitating, making things easier than they otherwise would have been. The test range isn't for Joe flying the same thing that he could fly anywhere else. It's a test range, and it's for trying new things, and not just new equipment, but also trying out new mission sets, and supporting new data sets that don't exist yet. And so, there's got to be a reasonable reason you are going to a test range rather than just operating, just out there in places where you could operate anyway. So that could be new hardware. It could be hardware that's outside of some of the existing things that you want to try before you go and invest a lot of money into certification. It could be that you're trying a new mission set, that sort of thing. So that's a good reason to come to one of the test ranges.
Interesting. I didn't think about that in terms of mission set. I always just think in terms of hardware. So that's a very good point. Kevin, what brings people out to Tillamook specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeff is spot on all those things there. The only things I'd add to it are, at a test range, it also affords the operator the ability, or the tester, the ability to understand not just, woo, that worked and it worked once, but under what conditions. So to be able to record in parallel all of the atmospherics, the weather, anything else that impacts on the problem. What was the electromagnetic background at that time? How did you maintain comms? All that kind of stuff fits in. So it's truly, as Jeff's saying, it's a test range. It's not just going out to the local park and staying under 400 feet. There is a reason to go do that. But if you really want to go make sure you understand all the parameters that can weigh on success or failure, as well as to be able to then move into not just we did it once and one time, but into an actual program. We can provide that expertise from the test range as to how to develop safe operating procedures so that on a routine basis, someone can operate their platform capability within the national airspace. And it fits into all these other things we've been talking about today that are out there, the UTM and et cetera. There's a lot of parameters to pay attention to.
Sure, makes perfect sense. Steve, anything to add?
I would just echo what the gentleman said, and then just the infrastructure, depending on the vehicle. Some of them need immense amounts of power to charge batteries. The data that's pulled down off of some of these vehicles to ship it back to home base, wherever that happens to be. There's a lot of data getting pulled down and sent home. We've also, at least at the airport here in Pendleton, we've had 5 large UAS stacked in the air at one time. A couple of them in the excess of 1,000 pounds. I walk my dogs at the local park. I'd prefer they not do that over my head while I'm walking the dogs. So I think there's some real benefit to having a controlled, safe area. I think Kevin spoke to that a little earlier, for these folks to go and do their testing and have professional support staff there to back them up.
Excellent points all. Now, another question which we've got, which just came in, is sort of what's your typical profile of the company that comes to work with you? Is it big? Is it small? What are they hoping to do? Are they companies at all? I think, Kevin, you said in your case, some of them are government agencies.
Both. I don't think we can characterize it or put it in a box. It's. I will say one thing though, because it's parallel to what you just asked. When the FAA put the test ranges together, it's true they didn't make it so that the test ranges had to be used. And if someone wants to go put their own profiles together, get their waivers, stand up the infrastructure, they can. Good news is then that's what Steve, Jeff, and us here at Tillamook have had to work with under. So that means we've had to build out our value even within that paradigm, and we're doing it. So there's things here that we can offer that are a little complex to get to if you just want to go do it on your own. But some of the larger companies will go do that. A lot of the companies under DoD contracts, Department of Defense provides the range space, and we're clearly seeing now that range space is becoming a premium. It's making them go, what are some of the options? How can we go do this type testing in national airspace? So there's opportunity there, but mostly I'd say it's small to mid-sized companies that there is just a wide variety of right now with a lot of new capability, and they want to come test it under certain constraints, prove that it works, and learn a lot about safe operating and operating systems capability, and then develop training capacity as well. They usually fit into that sort of space.
All right. Steve, you see anything different in Pendleton in terms of the average, to the extent there is such a thing, customer profile?
Well, I'll tell you, when we started out, we really believed that we were going to be after large UAS above 55 pounds, and that was especially those that needed runways and taxiways to take off and land, because we're headquartered at Eastern Oregon Regional Airport. But it's really evolved to be much more eclectic than that, the customer base. So we see defense contractors that either have military contracts or are seeking military contracts. And as I think Kevin just said, the military restricted airspace is hard to get into, extremely expensive. You can get pushed out if anything more important to them comes along. And so, we're not as sterile as that airspace, but it's also a pretty nice alternative to not getting your work done. So all over the map, I think Vahana project, you've got freight transport that both human and packages, and it's all over the map. So it's much more diverse than I thought. We have actually some small UAS companies that we work with that we're happy to do that. We've set up a number of remote launch and recovery sites for companies. So they'll come to us and say, hey, we need a very private environment on a couple thousand acres. And we've gone and hunted down those properties. We sent one company up to a ski resort that was empty in the summertime to operate. So it's really the same pitch we gave the FAA in the very beginning, which was the smorgasbord of testing environments when it was Alaska, Hawaii, and Oregon, still is, but really applies in Oregon as well. We've got all kinds of environments. What a wonderful state this is. And we can accommodate customers really with almost anything they need. So between the three sites.
Yeah, I would. I think anybody would be hard pressed to prove you wrong on that point. And then Jeff, how about you? What's your typical customer profile on the test range side? And then just a quick follow up. Somebody wanted to know where the range is located because they didn't know.
Oh yeah. So our test range, I'll answer that one first. Just because it's shorter. Our range is just south of Amity, Oregon. And if you're looking on a sectional, it is just west of the Salem Regional Airport airspace at the north end of it. So it's out in the middle of farmland. There are some hills, there's some lakes and that sort of thing as well inside that area, but very rural, generally speaking. And so yeah, there's that out away from no one out there. We know most of the property owners in the area, personally, just because we live out this direction too. And so there's a lot of privacy you can have operating at our test range. What we see is, we have a grass strip, so we're not going to get the really large UAVs. We're not trying to get the really large UAVs. I think Pendleton's probably the best, and Tillamook's certainly better suited for those that require long runways and larger systems. We do a lot of small systems. We do a lot of small systems and new sensors. We do a lot of new mission sets. For instance, we had a small one that could have met Part 107, but they wanted to test a sensor that was at an altitude that was different than Part 107 would allow. Yeah. Simple, easy, just really quick, and away we go. We didn't have to do much hand holding or anything with that, and we were able to provide value to that customer and just further that. And it's really, it's not something that we're, I don't think any of us are out trying to make money on this. This is the community support that we're trying to do to minimize the time and expense of new mission sets to get accomplished at the end of the day. There's a lot of things that UAVs promise to bring to the world, and our job is ultimately to make them bring them to the world quicker. And so if we can help out a small company or a large company bring that mission set to fruition quicker, then the rest of the business, the rest of the industry thrives as a result.
Well, I laud your selflessness there, although as the economic director in Pendleton, I'm not sure Steve would agree with you, but I think he and Kevin are doing okay on that score anyway. Well, thank you all three gentlemen for participating in our panel discussion here. We have reached the end of that, and in fact, we're rapidly approaching the end of our whole symposium, which leaves it to me to hand off the conversation to Jeff, which certainly makes it easy because he's already here, to wrap up our event today. So again, Steve, Kevin, thank you so much for being here today. Always interesting to talk about what's happening in the test ranges. Frankly, I wish we had more time. But that said, it's time to move on. So I hand it off to you.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick, and I'll give the round of applause to our esteemed MC for hosting this event and doing a fantastic job at it. Really appreciate you and your service to the industry. It's a really honorable thing. Thank you very much for that.
Glad to do it. Thank you, Jeff.
And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, Mobile Power Solutions and Assist for sponsoring this event specifically. You know, your support is invaluable and is really important to putting on these educational events. So everyone knows this is, you know, we obviously have the live event. After a period of time, we will also post these so that they can educate the public as well in a broader way. So the learning doesn't necessarily end here. We also like to thank Hood Tech, Northwest UAV. Let's see, we got Northwest Aerospace, Near Space Corporation, and the Tillamook Test Range, EPBMB, Perkins Coie, Technical Tooling, and of course, Orca Capital and Wendy Kellington, the attorney at law. Really appreciate all of our sponsors.